Hi again, so today we're digging deeper into home hi-fi, as we'll be taking a look at the Matrix Audio Element I, a DAC and headphone amplifier combo device with some unique features rolled up its sleeves. But first I'd like to say a big thank you for 250 subscribers. Now just imagine that many people in a room. So if you've got $1,000 burning a hole in your pocket, is it worth splashing the cash, or are you just spreading the fire? Well, that's going to be down to your individual requirements and how well they match the product's feature set. But I'll give you the short answer first, and that's yes. For the price point, the Element I actually offers more than most of its competitors. And whilst the same system could perhaps be accomplished with separates for less, they lack the same simplicity of such an all-in-one device. ESS Pro DACs are sparse and typically very expensive. Most consumer DACs use the mobile or low-power versions. The difference here is akin to computer processors, which can be derived from the same silicon or design, but binned according to performance measurements. The Pro is for those looking for class-leading performance and understand the price premium. More complex power delivery, implementations, and smaller manufacturing yields due to tighter tolerances all contribute to this. And so Element I's nearest competitors are the likes of Mytek, Benchmark, RME and Topping, but since I do not have experience with such devices, I cannot draw sound comparisons or extrapolate which is better. I can, however, give you my individual thoughts, subjective opinions, and experience with the device in question, in comparison to devices that I've used or owned. We'll get started first by rolling some video to give you a detailed look at the product, along with a sound comparison against a couple of devices to see if you can pick up any differences. The device will be indicated on the screen. So let's start going over my initial impressions, and in the background, play back the unboxing. Upon taking the device out of the box, it was clear a lot of thought and attention has gone into the design of it, from its noise isolating feet to its unique industrial design. The outer casing and chassis are aluminium, and so is the remote, both finished in a nice black aesthetic. There's no sharp edges throughout the product at all. Everything is nicely rounded or chamfered. The inputs and outputs of the device are plentiful, so starting from left to right, let's go over what we get. So here we see our first I/O block, which is a set of analog outputs by means of an RCA connection and two balanced XLR connections for left and right channels. Moving on, we have our digital input block. Here we see a digital coaxial input, optical, I2S and USB. You might now be wondering what I2S is. Well, that's another digital input connection which takes the form factor of a HDMI connection, in this case that is. This is so you can use an external USB interface or audio interface. It might be optical as well, it doesn't have to be USB, but this means instead of using the USB interface from the XMOS chip inside, use an external one or a dedicated one. This might reduce jitter or any USB playback issues that you might come across, and as they get developed further down the road, you can upgrade the USB interface. Next up, we have our streaming and network block. Here we see our two USB host slots, an Ethernet connection, and a wireless antenna. Some models in the Element series also come with a micro SD card slot as well, so you could use that as an alternative over USB. And lastly, we have the power input for our 12V switch mode power supply, which takes the form factor of a wall wart unfortunately. We also have an optional ground connection. I will note the power supply is obviously upgradable to a linear power supply, and if that interests you, well, you could consider the model up, the I believe Element M, which has an integrated internal linear power supply specifically designed for that unit. So now I just thought I'd demo to you how easy it is to set up the USB playback in case you have a large collection of files or like to rip CDs, or simply grab a USB stick, head to the computer and plug it in. Once on the computer, make sure the drive is formatted to NTFS I haven't tested FAT32 or any other formats yet, but I know NTFS works. We'll then just find our media, drag it across, and we're done. We'll take the drive out and plug it into the back of the Element I. We'll then simply open up the app, head to the library page, hit the Files tab, and we'll immediately see our USB plugged in and accessible to the device. The app will then begin indexing all of the files on the drive it sees, so they're fully searchable. It will also pick up any cover art and the such like. There's 2 USB host slots, so you can plug in a maximum of 2 USB storage devices, whether those be hard drives or USB sticks. You can also connect S&B file shares, so if you have a storage array or NAS, you can use that over the network to access your media. Likewise, you can use online streaming services like Tidal or Qobuz. Well, Qobuz isn't supported yet, but it's soon to be fully supported. Both of these services then enable you to do lots of streaming over the web, which I find is great for discoverability of new tracks. And so if you're like me and don't actually store many files and use streaming services, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the technical performance of the DAC. When using it just as a DAC with balanced XLR line outputs, it sets the output to 4 volts RMS. The signal to noise ratio when using it like this is greater than or equal to 127 dB, which is class leading. And if you look at the performance metrics or measurements done on Audio Science Review, it's clear that Matrix Audio products do hold themselves to quite a high standard and meet their measurements. To achieve this level of signal to noise ratio, the total harmonic distortion plus noise is absolutely minimal. Channel separation is also ridiculously high at 143 dB, so you could probably say that this DAC is completely transparent. Obviously when using the RCA outputs there's a slight drop in the overall performance, but not a really significant drop, and even on RCAs it would still be considered transparent as well. Once we start to get above about 120 dB signal to noise ratio, that's when I think you can really consider a DAC to be audibly transparent or the such like. Where you may begin to see the discrepancies between DACs is the levels of distortion at certain frequencies. So say in the bass region, a low performing DAC might actually have a really high level of distortion in the bass, but across the overall frequency range it's got a really low THD plus noise figure. But in reality, when you give it bass notes, or if your music's mastered, you know, towards those lower frequencies, you might actually be hitting a bit more distortion there, so then the performance of the DAC is actually dropping. So along with this very competent DAC, you're actually getting a really good performing headphone amplifier as well. Though in this aspect, the headphone amplifier isn't actually class leading. The DAC is, but the headphone amplifier isn't. It just can't quite keep up with the likes of Geshelli shit and THX type amplifiers that, you know, are pumping out these really well performing and measuring amplifiers at just such low costs. But you do have to give credit where credit's due. It has a really low output impedance, so it'd be great for very sensitive IMs. The output impedance is less than 0.6 ohms. The overall output power is quite high. It does 1.3 watts into 33 ohm load and 124 milliwatts into a 600 ohm load, so it can definitely drive hard to drive headphones as well. And to my ears, it sounds really good. Definitely the best I've heard. I think it could make a really great pairing with, say, the Focal Elegia, which is a headphone I own, or the Focal Stellia. Definitely bring out the most detail out of any of my other headphone amplifiers or DACs that I've had experience with. Where it was most discernible was in the bass. It just had immense bass detail, and it really brought new life to certain tracks. The frequency response was completely neutral and flat, so it matched my Burson Playmate in this regard. So the sound is uncoloured from the DAC to the headphone amplifier, leaving your headphones to determine the overall sound signature, but presenting the best quality signal it can. One of the things I really enjoyed about using the product was the streaming aspect of it, as I could adopt very relaxed sitting positions, and I didn't feel tied to my desktop as my source of audio. I could just use my phone, start a track playing, and sit and relax, all doing this whilst having no drop in quality, since the audio streaming is done over the network and it's all lossless. Though I haven't tried it yet, it can be used as a Roon endpoint, so that might be a feature worth looking into. When you dig into the menus of the Element I, you'll find a range of settings, such as frequency response filters, jitter eliminator, and DPLL. There's 7 different frequency response filters. I stuck with number 3, which is fast roll-off, linear phase. I use this on all my DACs, or all my DACs that have this option, as from what I can hear, this seems to be the best choice. The differences between the filters only really becomes apparent on lower sampling rates. It will most likely be impossible for you to hear the difference on higher sampling rates, but you may find the hybrid filter cuts off the high frequencies just a bit too early. So I'll just now go over some small complaints I had about the device. It's very difficult to get a device absolutely perfect, and to be honest here, I'm being quite nitpicky. Though the screen is very bright, at certain angles it can be difficult to read the very top line of text, as it falls behind the edges of the window. I found the wireless signal to be quite weak unless the antenna was fully propped up, and to put that in perspective, the router is about 15 meters away, and we don't have brick internal walls or anything like that, but it is passing through one floor at least. And when using the app I did experience some crashes, I think when it was struggling to connect to the device. So I can highly recommend the Matrix Audio Element I. As for its price point, it does actually offer a lot of features, and when you look at the competitors, like the Mytek Brooklyn Bridge, which comes in at 3 times the price at £3,000, which implements the exact same DAC and offers the exact same streaming services. When looking at it, you might compare it to the RME ADI2 Pro as well. Though the RME is more desktop focused and a bit more limiting in that aspect, it does offer some unique features such as the internal DSP adjustment and EQs, but its DAC isn't up to the same level as the Matrix Audio, but its headphone amplifier does perform better, so it's all horses for courses really. If you're looking for something really versatile with a great feature set, but maybe not the master of that particular aspect, but still performs very competently, then I suggest you have a serious look at the Matrix Audio. Right, that's all for today. I really hope that was useful to someone, and perhaps consider subscribing.